All right, thanks Danielle. So yeah, my name's Dan Ortman, Microsoft Advisory Practice Lead for North America at SoftwareONE. And I want to thank everybody for joining. This is getting to be a much bigger topic here coming to the end of 2018. So this is actually part 1 of 4. And at the end of this session, I'll get into what the other webinar series is going to be about and how that kind of relates to what our methodology is and how it can help you get through the process. Okay, so this is the agenda. What we'll do in this initial session is kind of talk about what it actually means to have the end of support, when this is going to happen, who this is impacting, what the options are, and I like to talk about what some of the other organizations are doing. Sometimes it's good to hear what else is happening in the industry, what other people are doing to kind of take on this challenge. And we've started to have a lot of conversations with our customers about this. So I'm going to share a little bit about what we're seeing and some suggestions on what the next steps are and how SoftwareONE can help with that as well. Okay, so what does the end of support actually mean, and why is it so important? A lot of people may already be aware of some of these things, but I'd like to kind of dive into these a little bit more specifically. The number one is really security risk. So there's a lot of studies. I'm sure a lot of people on the call have seen some of these studies where it shows something close to 50% is what most of them say that of data breaches. It's because of unpatched servers. So this is definitely a major, if not the number one, reason that there's security breaches. So having an unpatched server is a really big deal, and that's exactly what this means. The end of support means no more security patches will be coming out for SQL Server 2008 or SQL Server 2008 R2. So security, that's a big thing. That's a big deal. Another statistic that, again, there's a lot of studies done on this, but typically it's somewhere in the 40% range of organizations that have had some sort of a data breach. So it's a significant amount of organizations are affected by this, and it's certainly a big deal when it comes specifically to having unpatched servers. Another thing that we're hearing is a bigger and bigger priority is regulatory compliance, whether it's SOX, HIPAA, all different sorts of regulatory compliance that different types of organizations have to adhere to. What ends up happening is when you have unpatched servers, that's certainly a red flag in terms of an audit risk when it comes to regulatory compliance. So it's not just a security breach risk if you in fact have an attacker. It's also just in terms of if you were audited for one of these regulatory compliance mandates, then that's another area where you're at risk to fail an audit. Third is licensing. So this one is a little bit kind of a different angle. And what we mean by the licensing risk is depending on how you've deployed SQL, and what the future state looks like, how you plan to address this 2008 challenge, licensing is a big part of that. So do you have software assurance? Do you not? Are your future plans to upgrade? Is it, there's all these different options, and we're going to get into that in a little bit on this session here. But the licensing is absolutely a big topic when it comes to this, because it changes what your options are and what the financial risk is. And then finally, support. And this isn't Microsoft support. This is really support from all of your other vendors. So whether it's a tier 2, tier 3, doesn't matter. Whatever your applications are, a lot of them include support. And what we see a lot of times is those vendors or those applications are no longer supported, if the database, the underlying database is not supported. So they're essentially saying, well, look, if your database isn't even supported and you can't patch that, then we're not going to support the application, right? So there's some risk there as well that you can, potentially lose some support on other applications. So that kind of rounds out, why this is so important, but what end of support really means for SQL. So when is this going to happen? July 9th, 2019, that's the date. So yeah, that's less than 7 months from today. Once we get through holidays and all of that, we're going to be down to 6 months, and it's going to happen really quick. The reason that this is so important, and we'll get more into the details, but the reason this is so important is there's a lot that has to happen. We don't just, just kind of click an upgrade button or click a migrate button. There's a lot of planning. There's a lot of process, testing, QA, things like that go into being able to upgrade a SQL server. So this date is a big deal, and it's going to come fast. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about is, what we're hearing from some of our other customers in terms of this date and the timing. In general, what I would say over the last few months, what I've been hearing from a lot of organizations is this is a 2019 initiative. So I think a lot of organizations are planning that by the end of 2019, that 2008 R2 SQL servers will all have some sort of a resolution. Now we're going to get into what those options are, but some sort of resolution in 2019. Ideally, of course, we're suggesting that before the July 9th date, that's fully executed. But I understand, there's a lot of scenarios where there's just too many servers to get that done in that amount of time. So again, July 9th, 2019, coming fast. Who is this impacting? So I like to bring this up just because when you look at some of the statistics that I mentioned at the beginning, what you kind of start to see is this impacts everybody, and so that's my picture of everybody on the screen. So whether it's a large organization, a small organization, almost every organization has SQL, and whether there's a lot of 2008 or not, that's another question. But typically, what we're seeing is there's a significant of SQL spend in most organizations. And what we're fortunate to have at SoftwareONE, because we're one of the largest software asset management service organizations in the world, we have a tremendous amount of data to analyze when it comes to things like this. And our partners do as well, our tool partners. And so what we've done is we've done some research, and there's between 40 and 45% of SQL servers that are in production today are still 2008 R2 SQL servers. That is just a massive amount of SQL 2008 that's out there. So the reality is, if you're facing this 2008 question, you're not alone, not even close to being alone. There's so many organizations that are reaching out to us that are looking for some sort of a solution, and just based on our data, there's even more that could be, and it's just an absolute massive amount of 2008 R2 that's out there, and I would say, it would seem likely that as an attacker, you would want to take advantage of that and exploit that. So it seems likely that after the July 9th date, that there would be an increase in number of attacks for 2008 R2 SQL servers, because nobody's going to be patching them. So yeah, that's it. Who's it impacting? It's really almost everybody. Okay, so that brings us to what our options are. We've boiled this down to really 4 different options. So let me kind of talk about pros and cons of each of these. Upgrade is kind of a natural first answer. If you can upgrade, it makes a lot of sense. Whether that's just going to 2012 or going to 2017 SQL Server, either way, you're going to get the support and you're going to get a lot more features and functionality. For those DBAs that are listening, there's a massive amount of changes from even just 2008 R2 to 2012. That's when availability groups and things like that were introduced. That's also when the processor to core licensing change happened and things like that. So there's a real big gap from 2008 R2 to going up from there. So an upgrade, it's a very natural first discussion to just do an upgrade. From there, there's also extended support. So extended support is where, and typically, I would say this is the largest of organizations. This is one of their main considerations of the four, and that's because there's so many SQL servers that really the only option that makes sense is let's work on the upgrades or work on some of these other options. But for now, the short term, we need to just pay for extended support. So you can, in fact, pay Microsoft and get extended support on 2008 R2 SQL servers. And sometimes that just makes sense to get through, again, if there's a 2019 or, 2019 to 2020 initiative to get all 2008 R2 SQL servers to a different state, it may just take that much time. And so there's organizations that are going to have to do the extended support. The trouble with that is it can be very costly. And again, it's more of a short-term solution. Another option is transform. So instead of upgrading or paying for extended support, you can start looking, especially if you've got a strong development team, you can start looking at transforming that application. So if you're looking at Azure, for example, you can have a SQL DB as a service and actually build the application to work with SQL as a service. And so you're not worrying about managing a SQL server and doing updates and security patches and things like that. So that's becoming a bigger conversation as well. So transform, it's absolutely an option. If there's not a significant number of 2008 servers in the environment and the dev team can kind of take this on over the next few months, it's absolutely a viable option, even if it's just for a few of the servers. And then finally, migrate. And by migrate, I specifically here I'm talking about Azure. And what Microsoft is offering right now is if you move that 2008 R2 SQL server to Azure, you're actually getting an extension on support for 3 years. So I mean, this is super smart on Microsoft's part because if you are avoiding paying for the extended support and you're considering migrating to a cloud platform, it certainly makes Azure attractive, along with things like the Azure hybrid benefit and things like that. I think Microsoft's doing a real good job of making that look attractive. So migrate to Azure, it's really a good option for the servers that have to stay on 2008 or 2008 R2, which we're seeing there's a lot of very legitimate reasons for that. It could be, the application doesn't support anything newer. You might be using some older technology that, isn't available in the newer versions of SQL. There's lots of reasons to not do an upgrade, to not transform. And this gives you that option. You can maintain the existing environment, but migrate it to Azure, and then you're getting your extended support without having to pay specifically for the extended support. So it's another really good option that we're seeing people take advantage of. Okay, so how do you get through this process? What's the methodology? So this is what we've created at SoftwareONE to get kind of from where you're at now to the point where you're executing on a plan. So I'll just step through this fairly quickly. And I do want to note also that this methodology is what we've built this webinar series on. So it's 4 parts. This one is to kind of introduce the concepts. And the next 3 are these 3 different phases of the methodology. So whether you're having SoftwareONE help fill some of those gaps or you're doing this on your own, this is a really solid methodology to get through the process. And so I'll just kind of walk through that. The first one is discovery, or really SAM, or software asset management. You have to know what you have, right? So you have to have a list of your 2008 R2 SQL servers. And to be honest, we have scanned a lot of environments, and there's a lot of servers that are even older than 2008. So this is a great time to address those as well. But here you want to find out, okay, what are the 2008 R2 servers that I have out there? And in a lot of cases, they're servers that some people didn't even know were still out there, didn't even know existed, which again, that's a security vulnerability. So it's really important to know where these servers are at, what the servers are, and then go through your licensing entitlements. This is a critical part, right? So if you have software assurance, then, sorry, I've got a pop-up coming up on my screen. Oh, there we go. So if you've got your software assurance, then you're able to do the upgrade as part of your software assurance benefits. So that's a really big deal, is knowing what entitlements you have versus if you just have some legacy licenses that may not have some of the benefits that you need. Another benefit is a license mobility and cloud license mobility. So do you have the rights to move the server to Azure, for example? If you can move the server to Azure and the license is included, then you can take advantage of that extended support in Azure, right? So there's some really important things that are built into software assurance benefits. So knowing what servers are covered and which ones aren't is an absolutely critical part to really reconcile what the actual license position is for SQL. So that's the SAM component. Once you've established what you have deployed and what you're entitled to, then we can get into the optimization. So the optimization is going to be a number of things, but this is where we can start to take a look at aligning what those rights and entitlements are to the specific servers. And then this is where we can start to optimize licensing spend as well. SQL is a very expensive product, usually the most expensive after Office 365. So, once you have that full list of servers and what all the entitlements are, then we're able to take that and do that analysis to help you optimize how you're using that spend. Whether again, you're leveraging the software assurance benefits for things like license mobility or upgrading, we're really able to go through with a fine-tooth comb and help you figure that out. That can be a massive deal, a very high value process. And then ultimately, because of that, going through with that fine-tooth comb, we're able to develop a roadmap for those 2008 R2 servers. And part of that can include a lot of things, like looking at performance analysis, looking at are you seeing a lot of errors in the logging and things like that, maybe if there's a correction to the application, now you can consolidate more databases onto to individual servers, or there's a lot of different strategies when it comes to SQL in terms of what's the future state going to look like? Do we consolidate? Can we decommission some of them so that we don't just have a 2008 server sitting out there that's left for a security risk when we're not even really using it, right? So there's a lot of things to consider, a lot of different ways to optimize how we're investing in SQL as well. Okay, so once we've determined what's deployed, what we're entitled to. We've done the analysis. We've optimized the licensing. We've got a plan in place for 2008 and 2008 R2. Now it's time to execute. So our technology services is able to help you execute. That can mean a lot of different things as well. One of the things is with Azure, it may sound great to go and take advantage of being able to move that SQL Server into Azure. We've got the software assurance. We're all covered. Now we can get extended support. We don't have to worry about it. But then it's, well, we don't have Azure already. So what does that process look like? We're able to help with that. We're able to actually set up and configure the Azure tenant, make sure that, from a security, from a networking standpoint, connectivity, that all of that is in place and ready for production. We can also then provide the training on how to use the Azure tenant and how to, going forward, how to keep growing that environment. We'll design the migration plan and execute it. So, not only are we just providing the advisory and what those next steps look like, but we can also execute on that. And that includes doing the upgrades, doing helping with the decommissioning, things like that. So whatever the roadmap for these servers look like, if there's some gaps that you need to have filled because of the time frame, because of level of expertise, whatever it is, that's something that we're able to help with and fill those gaps wherever it may be in this process. Okay, so what's next? Again, this is a 4-part series. I wanted to take this first one to kind of introduce really what does the end of support mean, why it's such a big conversation, and so that's what we've done here. Going forward, we want to dive into that methodology at a deeper level for each one of those. So in the next part, we're going to talk about tools and what types of tools that we leverage, what type of data that captures, and how we're able to use that, and really deep dive into how entitlements have such a big impact on what you're able to do and what you're able to plan for in the terms of the roadmap. Part 3 is going to be licensing focused. So how do we optimize licensing? How do we avoid overspending when it comes to SQL? How do we take advantage of the investment that we've made? Very big conversation. And then finally, if the remediation plan does include migrating to Azure, we're going to have some Azure experts come on and talk about what that process looks like, take some of the mystery out of getting through implementing a workload in Azure and what what tools we use, why those tools matter when it comes to application dependencies and building out, moving an actual workload into Azure. So it's kind of rounds out the end of that methodology and executing.